Today's a great Sunday, as any Sunday, but today we are starting a brand new set of talks, a brand new series on relationships. We're calling this Happily Ever After. Doesn't that sound cute? That sounds like something we want. Happily Ever After. You know, it's funny, that phrase is really connected and attached to Disney princess movies. Right, I have a 1-year-old, and she's a little girl, and my 3-year-old boy, and my 1-year-old, we're already starting to watch some princess movies, and she's loving it. And just 2 weeks ago, we were just kind of browsing through the channels, and Sleeping Beauty, the original, right, like 1930-something, that was on. And so we were watching the tail end of it, and Sleeping Beauty, she gets awakened by her prince. And sure enough, and I knew this series was coming, and so I'm watching, and I'm just keeping an eye out for it. And he picks her up, puts her on the horse. They ride off into the sunset. And you can help me finish this. And then the words come up on the screen, and they lived happily ever after. Right? That is the traditional princess. That's what we all want. That's what happens in fairy tale world. You meet your prince, and he sweeps you off your feet, and you met yesterday, and you got married the next day, and now it's happily ever after. And we love that in romantic comedies, but that's why there's never a sequel to a romantic comedy. It's just at some point you know she's with him, but by the end of the movie, she's going to be with him, because that's who she's supposed to be with. And they get together, and it's like, man, we want happily ever after. There was a Disney movie that was released in 2008 called Enchanted. Enchanted. Anyone here, did you see Enchanted? You don't have to. Awesome. And so some of you did, maybe some of you didn't. Now, if you didn't see it, I hope you're not planning to see it, because I'm going to ruin a little bit for you, okay? So save your emails. I'm giving you a spoiler alert. It's from 2008, so you should have seen it by now. But it's cool. Amy Adams is in it, and it's kind of like that cartoon meets real people, which in 2008, I mean, that was unheard of. How do you do that? How do you get a cartoon to interact with a real person? So it was groundbreaking in its day. But there's this princess, her name is Giselle, and she lives in fairy tale land. She lives where happily ever after is normal. And she has her prince, and of course there's the evil queen there. It's the Disney theme. And at some point the evil queen grabs Giselle, and she wants to banish her to a different world. Get her out of fairy tale land and get her into another world, another space. And she's going to send her to a world that's very, very different. Very, very different. In fact, it's nothing like her world. And what the queen says as she's throwing her down this well into this new world, she says, I'm sending you to a place where there is no happily ever after. Right? I'm sending you to a place where there's no happily ever after. And she throws her down there, and don't you know, she lands in Manhattan. It's real close to Long Island, right? So we know this. And suddenly this princess from fairy tale land is in our world, which the queen just said, you're in a space where there's no happily ever after. You're in a brand new world. And she starts to see things that are confirming what the queen said. She runs into a couple, they're married, and they're kind of going through some issues, and they're meeting with attorneys. And it's interesting to watch, like, her reaction to what's going on, because she came from a place where it's like, what do you mean you're not in love with him anymore? What do you mean you don't like her? What do you mean she's not your best friend? Like, you're together. Isn't this happily ever after? And she's overwhelmed at this thought that happily ever after can't exist in this world. That doesn't seem right. Now, here's what's interesting. If I were to take all of my time up with you this morning, and I were to spend the next 30 minutes convincing you and showing you, and I pulled out charts and graphs, and I showed you this is where marriage is heading, this is where families are heading, and you know your experience and your friends, and I told you there's no way that happily ever after is possible for you. You know what you would do? You would tune me out, and you would push against it. And you would say, I don't care what he says. I don't care what culture says. I don't care what the statistics show. I don't care about that, because there's something in you, there's something in me that says, I know what I'm being told. I know what I've seen. I know that relationships seem to fall apart, but there's something in us that wants to believe that the evil queen is wrong. All right, there's something in you. If you're in a relationship with someone right now, there's something in you that is hoping that you're going to reach happily ever after. Right? If you are invested in a relationship, you're not hoping that things are going to fall apart. That would be crazy. You didn't go into this, man. I just 1 week. Just 1 week is all I'm looking for here. I mean, I'll take one day. We're good. And let this thing fall apart. If you're serious into a relationship and you want to move and find that person that's going to fulfill you and satisfy you, and man, you have that special connection, and it goes beyond the guys that you golf with, or the guys you play cards with, or the girlfriends you go shopping with. Beyond that, you want that one special connection with one person. Then there's something in you, there's something in me, that says, you know what? I want to believe that happily ever after is possible. I want to believe that that queen is wrong, and that our world is not the world where happily ever after doesn't happen. But here's the problem. you have experiences, and you do have data, and you do have things that you've seen around you and things that you felt that makes happily ever after and staying in love very, 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 can I keep going? Very hard. It makes it very hard. Now you're going to notice we're going to be talking about this for the next 4 weeks throughout the month of October. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about happily ever after and staying in love, but I'm going to spend like 10 seconds talking about falling in love right now, because that's really all it takes. Right? It takes 10 seconds to fall in love. You know, love at first sight. You know, I just fall in love, and we met and we felt something, and I knew he was the one and she was the one. And some of you, you've actually fallen in love with people you've never met before. You just saw her on the movie, and you're like, that's it, she's the one, and you already started naming your kids, and you knew she's it. And for ladies, you knew there was a guy in a boy band at some point in your locker and his picture, and it was, I love him, he's so great. And so falling in love is easy. In fact, I would say that falling in love requires a pulse. Like, you guys are all upright right now, and you have a pulse. We're all capable of falling in love. Falling in love is easy. So we're not going to talk about falling in love. But what's interesting, as easy as it is to fall in love today, I think it's way harder to stay in love. Amen. We've made it very easy to fall in love today. I mean, if you can't do it on your own, there are thousands of organizations that can help you fall in love. Give them a little money, take a picture of yourself, pick the year. You don't even have to pick current. Like, just whatever year I look best in, 2007. That's my profile picture right there. And you can just connect with people that way, and that's a good thing, and we're helping people fall in love. But let's talk about staying in love. Let's talk about happily ever after, because that's really, really hard. But you want it. So you want happily ever after. You want to be in a relationship with someone who gets you and you're connected to. Well, then what are we going to do to get there? And this is the problem. You and I, we have experiences and we have felt certain things that are not helping us reach happily ever after. See, maybe you grew up in a house where mom and dad were both there, they were together, but they weren't in love. You knew it. You could sense it. They were there. They spent time together, and it was great. But there was something that was, I don't know that they're happy. I don't know that happily ever after is there. Or if it wasn't your home, then maybe you saw in your friend's home, or you had relationships in your own life growing up where you didn't feel certain things, where you wanted to feel loved and you wanted to feel accepted and you wanted someone to embrace you and you thought that you earned their trust and you thought that they were the one, even if it was a friendship. You thought they were the one who was going to be there, and we are BFFs, and it's forever, and I'm going to love you, and you're going to love me. And then they talked about you, or did something to you, broke your trust, and suddenly it's not happily ever after. It's what you saw. It's what you felt. There was a group of people that got together that are way smarter than me. These are doctors and psychiatrists, and they understand emotions and how the mind works and what we need to feel. And they came together in a space, and they sat down and they said, what would someone have had to experience, what would someone have had to feel in order, when they enter adulthood, to be emotionally ready to find that person and stay together? What would they have had to experience? What would they have had to gone throughout their life so that when they enter adulthood and they start really discovering relationship and they're in this and they want to connect with that one special person and they want to reach happily ever after and they want to stay on, what would they have had to feel? And they came up with a list. Can I share that list with you today? I'm going to. It's in my notes, so I'm going to do what I'm going to have planned. They had a list that they came up together, and so they get together and they say, you know what, in order for someone to enter adulthood and meet someone and be emotionally healthy, emotionally stable, ready to connect and reach happily ever after, they said they would have had to grow up in a house. I think we have a slide we could put up for this. They would have to grow up in a house where there were massive doses of respect, encouragement, comfort, security, support, acceptance, approval, appreciation, attention, and affection. Now that sounds like your house, doesn't it? It sounds just, you were the Partridge Family, you were the Brady Bunch, that was all there in your house, wasn't it? No, it wasn't. It wasn't in my house either. I don't think it was in any houses. Notice they said they needed doses, massive doses of that. So this isn't just on your birthday and special days and when you get to see dad or when you get to see mom and then I feel that. This is every day. You're feeling this. You're experiencing this. So you were supposed to feel that at some point in your life. That would have made you emotionally ready to enter into a relationship with someone and reach happily ever after. But we didn't feel that. We didn't experience that. What we felt was love. I met her and I felt love. I mean, it was great. She gave me these butterflies and these rainbows and I saw stars and it was great and we felt love and we fell in love. And because we fell in love, we wanted to keep that feeling, so we kept meeting together. And suddenly I wanted to introduce her to my family, and she brought me to her family, and it was great, and we were feeling something, and we were moving somewhere. But over time, that feeling got a little fuzzy. Well, I don't know that I feel love anymore from you. And what started out as a warm embrace became a stranglehold around the neck. And suddenly you're saying, hey, are you going to give me respect, encouragement, comfort, security, support, acceptance, approval, appreciation, attention, and affection? Or are you just cute? Or do you just have a nice car? What's going on here? Your job's great, but now it's taking you away from me, and I'm not feeling all of that anymore. And I think I need that. And happily ever after seems to be like it's only for fairy tales. And it can't happen here. And suddenly we're in a space where we're wondering, well, what am I going to do? Because now I have an emotional deficit. Right? I'm malnourished emotionally, but I entered into a relationship with you, and we're supposed to connect. You're supposed to give me what I want, and I'm supposed to give you what I want, what you want, but I can't give you what I don't have, and you can't give me what you don't have. And so now that feeling's gone. And now you have to do something because you fell in love, because that's easy, but now you want to stay in love, and it's, well, what do we do now? How do we reach happily ever after? And what's great, if that's where you land, culture has suggestions for you. Just as today we're going to read the words of a man named John who spent time with Jesus. He has a suggestion. Culture has a suggestion, and what I find to be the prevalent theme in culture when you don't experience that feeling any longer, well, here's what you need to do. You got to choose again. You chose wrong. That's the problem here. See, you felt something at the beginning, and it was great at the beginning, and it started out great, and there was a feeling there. But if that feeling has diminished over time, I mean, here's an option. Just choose again. Start it over, because the beginning's always great. The honeymoon phase, right? That's the good phase. You feel something different at the beginning. So if you don't feel it anymore, you must have chose wrong. After all, out of 8 billion people, there's one Mr. or Mrs. Right for you. And so what you need to do is you need to just figure out who that Mr. Right is and that Mrs. Right is and find that person. And if you don't find them and you don't feel it, just choose again and keep going, keep going. But that doesn't seem like a recipe for happily ever after. Seems like a good recipe for broken hearts and relational betrayal and giving your emotions to someone and then losing a piece of you to that person. But that's a possible option. That's a suggestion that we could follow. The problem is if you talk to a couple who's been in love together for over 20, 30 years, and they're together, and they're not just together because they have to be because the kids are there, but they're together because they love each other, you're going to hear, yeah, there were multiple times over these decades where we didn't feel something, but I decided it wasn't that I chose the right person, but that I was going to do the right thing with the person I chose. That's different. Not that I chose the right person, but that I'm going to do the right thing with the person that I chose. See, it's different now, and that's okay. I'm not knocking culture at all. This is an option for you. So I want to be unbiased in my presentation. There's culture's option. Choose again. Start over. Try again. And I'm not saying the first person you choose has to be the right person. We're not against dating in this space. It's not like that. You understand what I'm saying? It's when you've made a commitment to a person and you said, we're in a relationship, we fell in love, but we want to stay in love, but now I don't feel something, so I think I need to choose again. Well, what if there's another option? What if you want to reach happily ever after and you want to kind of prove Enchanted wrong and say, you know what, it's not that it can't happen here. It's just maybe there's another option. I just took 15 minutes of your time and I brought the mood down. Aren't you glad you came to church today? Like you thought I was coming in and maybe you bribed some people to get here and you're giving them lunch afterwards and you're thinking you're head pastor, this was lunch and now they're here and they're upset and angry. I know, I'm sorry. I took 15 minutes to kind of show you that this is what I want you to know in the first 15 minutes of us talking. The odds are not stacked in your favor. It's not looking good for you. If you're in a romantic relationship right now, or if you're not and you want to be, so singles, don't disconnect from this series, don't think this isn't about me. You have the prospects of meeting someone, you want to meet someone, well, let's look at some principles to help you. But if you are in a romantic relationship or want to be, I want you to understand, if you get one thing today, get this, the odds are not in your favor. This is not Hunger Games, may the odds be ever in your favor. They're not. They are not in your favor because of what you saw, because of what you felt, because of the options that you have to just choose again. So you want to reach happily ever after, but it's not looking good for you. And it's into this mess that Jesus steps in. We're not the first society or culture to have relational messes. Jesus steps into the world 2,000 years ago, and he steps into a very relationally messy system where human value is very low, where rights for individuals don't exist, where gender is a big thing and inequality is very big. And Jesus steps into the relational mess, and he offers us a teaching on how to reach happily ever after. Now, I got to warn you, a couple things. First, This is a paradigm shift. This is countercultural. What we're about to read, the words of Jesus recorded by a man named John who knew Jesus very well. This is the John that was there at the crucifixion. This was the John that took care of his mother Mary after Jesus ascended. He spent a lot of time with Jesus and his friends. John writes down what Jesus said, and I got to warn you, it's very, very different than what I've been talking about so far. And I also need to give you one other warning. We're going to read it, and you're going to think, really? That's why I came out to church today? That's it? I've heard that before. Like, duh. Like, we've heard this. In fact, you've probably read this, or if you had a wedding ceremony, or you were there, or you had a reading at yours, you probably heard it or had it read. So don't tune out. Don't say that's way too simple, that's way too easy. I want you to just consider what Jesus has to say here, because if we can grab it, if we can see it, I believe that it's going to make a difference. So we're going to read in the book of John. It's the fourth book in the New Testament, the second half of the Bible. And we're going to read one verse together today. John chapter 13, verse 34. John 13, 34. And we're going to have the scripture up here on the screen for you right there so you can read along with us. And what we like to do in this space is we stand when we read a verse. So I'm going to ask you to stand, and we're just going to read this. And you can read it out loud, or you can just listen and just look at it on the screen. But John 13, 34. So now I am giving you a new commandment. Love each other. Just as I have loved you, you should love each other. You may be seated, to which you can say, good job, Jesus. I never heard that one before. That's a brand new concept. Love the person that I'm in a relationship with. Love the person that I want to be in a relationship with. Now, let's be the people that Jesus actually said this to. Jesus was with some of his followers, his disciples, Jewish men, which by being Jewish meant that they understood a lot of commandments. Like we understand the 10 Commandments when it comes on prime time at Easter time. It's like 10 Commandments, and it's a great movie. We understand some of them. We could probably sit here and maybe come up with 4 or 5 that we could think of from memory. These Jewish men understood over 600 commandments. Over 600 commandments the Jewish people had. Over 600. And so Jesus shows up to them and says, hey, I've got a new one. To which I like to insert my own thinking of there was some eye rolling going on there. Like, really, Jesus? A new one? Do you know how many we have? We have over 600, and you're going to show up and tell us, I've got a new commandment for you guys. You're going to love this one. I like to think Peter, he was a little mouthy, so John doesn't record it, but I like to think Peter said something like, really, Jesus? This is where we're going? Another commandment, a new commandment? And then Jesus proceeds to tell them what we just read, what John records for us. Brand new, groundbreaking. Love each other. Love each other. To which they're looking at him the way you're looking at me, like, all right, what else you got for me, Jesus? I mean, that's it? Love each other? You said it was brand new. What's going on here? Love each other. And don't miss what Jesus is doing here, because he's doing something new. It's a little simple, but I think we've missed it. Jesus takes a word that we normally use as a noun in our relationships, and he makes it a verb. Jesus uses a word that we normally associate as a noun in romantic relationships, and he makes it the verb. See, when you first started your relationship with someone, or when you first started looking for a relationship, you were looking for love, the noun, the feeling. You wanted to feel something. And when you got around him and when you got around her, you did feel something, and it was great. In fact, you said things like, I just love the way she makes me feel. I just love when I'm with him because he makes me feel a certain way. And people even tried to convince you that the person wasn't good, and you just brushed him off because love is blind, and you were like, no, but you understand, when I'm with him, he's not like that. He makes me feel a certain way. And so we start our relationships, and we start looking for relationships with love the noun. And Jesus is talking to a group of guys, and today we're reading these words, and he's saying, no. It's not the noun, it's the verb. It's love each other. Here's the command, here's the imperative. Here's what you need to do. See, the foundation for happily ever after is to make love. A verb. See, when I stopped there, your minds went somewhere. You're going to remember it now. The foundation, some of you didn't get it again in a couple of seconds. The foundation for happily ever after is to make love. A verb. To make love a verb. That is the foundation that Jesus introduces here. And it's brand new, and it's almost like, I don't understand. What do you mean? Like, we know this. We're supposed to love the person. See, this is why I think Jesus wouldn't be a very good relationship counselor. Because this is what it would look like if you showed up with Jesus as a relationship counselor. You would go in with her and you would say, listen, Jesus, she just doesn't, and she said she would, and she doesn't anymore. And he would cut you off and say, hold on, do you love her? And you would look at him and say, no, well, I used to. And he would stop you there and say, no, you don't get it. You used to noun. See, you used to feel something. I'm not talking about that. I'm saying, are you actively loving her? Are you actively loving him? Are you loving him despite how you feel? Are you doing something? But we flip it around and we say, well, because I don't feel, I'm not going to do. And until I feel loved by you, then you can just make your own dinner. And until I feel something, well, then you can put your own clothes away because I don't feel loved, I don't feel appreciated. And we go back to our list and I don't feel any of that stuff. And because I didn't feel it growing up and because I expect to feel it now and because I don't feel it from you now, you can just sleep over there tonight. Right? And you've seen relationships like that. Maybe you've been in relationships like that. Here's a good way to think of it. When you started your relationship, it was almost as if it was a train. Let's use that imagery. And the engine that got you moving along was noun, the love, the noun, the feeling. It was pulling your relationship along. You needed to feel something. You don't get into a relationship with someone because you don't feel something. That's crazy. So you felt something with that person. Because you felt something, you kept getting together and you kept meeting each other and you kept going out on dates and you brought him to your family and her to, and it was pulling you along and it was working for a good amount of time. But at some point, the feeling stopped. You didn't feel it. You woke up one morning like, I don't feel loved by this person anymore. Now, here's the thing. If you could realize that at some point in your relationship, that noun needs to stop being the engine and go to the caboose, the back of the train, and verb love needs to take over, well, you're going to pull the feeling right along. And what's interesting is when you make love a verb, what that's going to do is trust me on this, don't let it leave the room, okay? This is a secret. You're going to understand something. When you choose to embrace verb love, noun love will re-enter the relationship. And it's hard. But when you choose to follow what Jesus is saying here, love each other, noun love will be pulled along in that thing, and at some point you're going to find it. You're going to find it because you're choosing, I'm going to love this person despite how I feel. Now, this is what Jesus goes on to say. He makes it a little harder. He says, love each other as I have loved you. Just as I have loved you, you should love each other. Maybe that's the new part of the commandment. See, what Jesus is saying here to his disciples and to us is you've got a lot of great places to find this example of how to love each other from. You might have grown up in a great home with great parents and they're still together. My parents have been together over 30 years. So, okay, you grew up there, that's great. Maybe you had grandparents and everyone in your family, they've always been together and every one of your relationships were healthy and strong and you felt everything and all the media you watched was only two people who loved each other and they always stayed together and you were just consuming. Maybe, let's say maybe. I think unlikely, but maybe that's all you ever saw and felt. Jesus is still showing up and saying, hey, there's a different example for you today. There's somewhere else for you to look to discover how to love another person. He says, love like I love. Which if you're in this space right now and you would never call yourself a Christian, you're exploring faith, you're checking this space out. This is interesting. Because for you, this could be your next step. Not to believe in Jesus, but maybe to consider, well, what did Jesus do? What did it look like? How did he love? Because here's what I love. God is so concerned about you. God cares about you so much that he's not content to leave you with the examples on a horizontal plane. He's not content to put you in a place where you can see good relationships in your home or on media or in your friends. He wants to give you another person to look to. And so Jesus comes to this world and he loves. Now, Jesus wasn't the only person to say this. Years later, there was a man named Paul, and Paul was a man who has dedicated his life to killing Christians. That was his job. You woke up tomorrow, you had a job. Paul woke up tomorrow, he had a job. He wanted to stop Christianity. He wanted to just destroy it. He was a religious Jewish person. He loved Jehovah. That was the God, and this Jesus guy was messing it up. And so he dedicated his life to killing Christians, imprisoning them, killing them. But at some point, he had an encounter with Jesus and the way Jesus loved him, and it changed things. And this Christian killer became a Christian himself who started writing to people about how much God loves. It's very interesting. You should read his story. And he writes to one church, and he kind of takes the teaching that Jesus gave here, and he teaches it to them. But I got to warn you, he uses a bad word. He uses a word that when you hear it, especially in a religious context, in fact, you may have heard this word before, and that's why you left church for so long. Because you heard about this, and you're like, look, it's 2017. There's no way this word applies to today. Because this is a bad word. We're going to call it the S word today, all right? Ephesians 5, he says, submit. Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Submit. Who likes that word? Submit. We don't like that word. In fact, if you were, like I said, if you were in religious circles and someone somewhere told you, you know what, because you're the man, she has to submit to you, and because you're the woman, happy wife, happy life, so you better do what she wants, and that's just what it is, just submit. You heard that and you pushed against it, and you were like, this is not going to happen. But that's because we confuse what Paul's talking about here. He's not giving us a way that a man can flex his muscles and say, listen, I'm the man, so you need to do what I say. Or a woman to say, if mama's not happy, ain't nobody happy, so you better make sure I stay happy. It's not what he's doing here. He goes on to talk about mutual submission. He goes on to talk about this concept where two people love each other and say, hey, I'm going to submit to you. I'm going to submit to you. I'm going to prioritize you. And he goes on to talk about husbands and wives. And he says, this is what it's going to look like. I'm going to make sure that you're the priority today. You want to see the example? It's this. It's you wake up tomorrow and you say, you know what? He's first. You know what? She's first. You know what? He's the priority. You know what? She's the priority. You know what? I'm going to make sure that everything I do is from an attitude of making the other person more important than me. That's love, the verb. That's love in action. When you say, I'm going to make sure that this person, what they want, comes first. That's different. We don't do that. See, if you've ever seen someone do that in real life, you are amazed by it. And if you haven't seen it, imagine it. Imagine if you saw two people and you're hearing their conversation and it's just something like, you know what, hey, I chose dinner last time, now you chose dinner. No, you choose dinner again. I know you chose it the past 10 days, but you just choose it again. It's all you. You pick the movie, and I don't need to buy new clothes. You buy new clothes. I just want you to be taken care of. You do what you're going to do. It's all about you. And suddenly, these two people, their biggest conflict is figuring out who's going to walk through the door because they're both trying to hold the door for each other. That's new. Could you imagine if that was the fight in your house? Like, we've got to go inside at some point. I mean, I'm holding this thing. You're going through. There's no way. Like, someone has got to walk through this door. But wouldn't you want that? Wouldn't you, if you saw that in a couple, you would pass by and say, you know what, they're going to make it. That's happily ever after. Somehow, some way, they're going to become that cute little old couple that holds hands and takes walks around the park. And it's like, man, I want that. And they must have been doing this. Let me point out something, though. Jesus and Paul, they both say the same thing. Jesus says, love each other the way I have loved you. Paul says, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. So what's interesting is both of these guys are also relaying this same concept of Jesus has to be somewhere in this. Now, I know the question comes up then, are you saying that people who don't have Jesus in their life can't reach happily ever after, they can't stay in love? My answer is I don't know. I don't know. But what I'm saying is these two guys who had a relationship with Jesus, they've recognized that, hey, when Jesus is involved in this, when we take our cue from him, when we understand how much he loves us and he becomes a part of this thing, it changes things. Suddenly submitting isn't so much me submitting because it's about Amy, but hey, there's Jesus in the picture. And loving each other isn't so much I'm loving because I want that feeling and I don't have that feeling, so I'm not going to, but it's wait a second, Jesus is in the picture. Remember what I said, the odds are not looking good for you. They're not looking good for me. They're not. I've been married 8 years now, but when I consider everything I've seen and felt, and if I just take all of that, everything culture tells me and everything I've felt emotionally or didn't feel emotionally, I could stack all of that up and say, you know what, the odds are not in my favor. And you right now, you have an example that you're looking to. We all do. We're taking our cue from somewhere. So it might have been the home you grew up in. It might have been your friend's home. It might be the relationships you see around you now. You're getting your example from somewhere. I want to ask you, would you consider Jesus being your example? Would you consider, I'm not saying believe in him, but would you consider saying, what would it look like to know what Jesus did? What would it look like to know the love that he has? Why is Paul so adamant about saying out of reverence for Christ? What does that mean? Why does Jesus himself say you need to love each other the way I love you? I want you this week to evaluate, where's your example? See, you, like me, you want to reach happily ever after. We want to prove that evil queen wrong. We want her to know, no, it's not just for fairy tales and Disney princess movies. There is a way for two people to stay in love, not just fall in love, that's a pulse, but stay in love. Reach happily ever after. Well, the foundation is to make love a verb. Now, next week, we're going to get really specific with this. So next week, we're going to talk about that S word a little more. We're going to talk about submission and what it looks like. So you want to come back next week just if you want controversy, right? That's just, I just want to hear what this guy has to say. Like, he's going to go into it. But I don't want you showing up next week, and I don't want you being blind. So when you leave today, we have these cards. Every single person is going to get one of these. And on the front of the card is actually the text that we're going to read together in our space. So today we had John up there. Next week we're going to have Paul's words again, because Paul really breaks down what submitting looks like. So you're going to get one of these cards. And on the back side, there's some questions here. Now, if you are in a romantic relationship with someone right now, here's my suggestion. You don't have to follow anything I say, but you don't have to follow this either. I'm not suggesting that you do these questions together, because I want you both to come back and I want you to both sit on the same side. Okay? Does that make sense? So I'm just, you might say, no, we're strong enough, we can do this. That's on you. I'm just making the suggestion. Read the questions in your own head and kind of answer them in your own time, and then you guys can discuss them after next Sunday. But I want you to look at these questions, and here's the other thing I want you to do. And if you're not a Christian today, you can do this. You don't have to be a Jesus believer to do these things. I want you to read the verse part on the front of this card every single day this week. So put it in a place where you're going to see it. For me, it's going to go in my car. And nobody sue me and say you were reading while you were driving. Okay, you know the concept? Like, I crashed because he told me. No. Put in your car, read it, and then put on your seatbelt and then drive. Okay, there's your instructions. But maybe it's going to go on your fridge. Maybe it's going to go on the mirror. But I want you to read it every day. And as you read it, I want you to think, what would this look like if this was a part of my relationship? What would it look like if these verses, the words that Paul says, what if they actually changed my relationship? What would that look like? And here's where I say, if you're not a Christian, you can do this, because if you've been stiff-arming God, and maybe even saying, I don't understand why people believe in Jesus, and I want to, but I can't. I don't get why they go to church. I don't get all that stuff. This is a great set of sentences for you to read to kind of understand why there are billions of people around the planet that believe in Jesus. Paul's words here, he really sums up what Jesus did and why. So this might just shed some light for you to say, oh, okay, maybe that's why. Maybe that's why they go to church. Maybe that's why they believe in Jesus. So this is great for every single person to read. The foundation to reaching happily ever after begins with making love a verb. This week, let's try this for one day. Forget the week. One day. What if tomorrow you wake up and if you're in a relationship, you say, you know what? Today, she's the priority. Today, he's the priority. Today, he's first. Today's she's first. And see if that verb love does not change the dynamic of a relationship. Jesus says that it will. And so why not? I mean, we tried everything else, right? If we want to reach this thing, why not give it a shot? But they don't deserve it. I know they don't deserve it. We're going to talk about that in 2 weeks. But I don't feel it. I know they don't. I know you don't feel it. We're going to talk about that next week. So we're going to go deeper, but the foundation is to make love a verb. Can we pray together? Let's bow our heads and close our eyes. Father, thank you that you care so much about us, that you care about our relationships, that you have given us such a great instruction through Jesus, your son, through Paul, a man who believed in Jesus. And today I pray that what we discover today we would actually use, we would consider it, we would take these cards and they wouldn't just stay somewhere, but we would read through them, and that your Holy Spirit would change our hearts as we read these things, and we would see our relationships start to change, and we would start to realize that love can't just stay a noun, it's got to be a verb. I thank you for who you are and for all you're doing in our lives. In Jesus' name, amen.